more than 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images. CNN teams are carefully going through the largest and what the Justice Department says is the final batch of Jeffrey Epstein files. It is an enormous collection of documents, and it includes references to some of the richest and most powerful people on the planet. That includes the current president, a former president, cabinet secretaries, a former prime minister, billionaires, and the list just keeps going. The Justice Department says tonight that its job is done. They say they complied with the statute, complied with the act, and did not protect President Trump or anyone else for that matter. But here is the thing. There is a hunger, a real thirst for information, and officials themselves are admitting that reviewing these documents probably will not fully satisfy it. So here is what we know so far. CNN is diving deep into this astonishing pile of over 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images from the last bundle of Jeffrey Epstein documents. This massive collection is packed with information, connecting some of the wealthiest and most influential figures across the globe, including the current president, a former president, cabinet members, a past prime minister, and billionaires. The list just keeps going. The Justice Department has declared that they have wrapped up their role in this process, firmly stating that they followed the law and did not play favorites with anyone, including President Trump. It seems there is a genuine hunger for this information, but it is not clear that the document review alone will satisfy that craving. Now, things took an almost unbelievable turn separately, showing how Trump's grip on power appears to be loosening. A group of senators from both sides of the aisle is openly urging Trump to step down due to concerns surrounding the Iran conflict and various national security issues. In an unexpected move, Trump chose to walk out of a Senate briefing rather than answering questions or defending his actions. While this call for his resignation is not legally binding, the intensity and tone of it are unprecedented. We are talking about lawmakers from both parties saying that Trump has lost the moral authority to lead the military. And they're even hinting that if he does not resign by a specific date, they might look into using the 25th Amendment or impeachment to remove him from office. When confronted during that closed-door meeting about civilian casualties, legal boundaries around war, and the resignation demand, Trump simply stormed out. It is important to note that just because someone is mentioned in these documents does not mean they have been accused of wrongdoing or did anything wrong. Many of these claims are unverified or rely on secondhand information. But these are the key findings the team has uncovered so far, and millions of pages have come out, with investigators still digging through them right now. Donald Trump's name appears thousands of times in these new documents. In some, he is merely mentioned in emails that Jeffrey Epstein sent to other people. But the files also contain a complaint from a woman who accused Trump of raping her in 1994 when she was just 13 years old. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation document, this accuser is identified as Jane Doe. Now, another layer to all of this is a formal bipartisan letter from senators where they have stated that Trump has lost the moral authority to command the military. We are talking about senators from both sides of the aisle signing this letter declaring that the sitting president is not fit to be commander-in-chief. It is a pretty extraordinary move and goes way beyond your usual political disagreements. They are actually saying that Trump cannot be trusted with the nation's nuclear arsenal and military forces. The letter also carries a bit of an ultimatum. If Trump does not resign by a certain date, they are prepared to look into the 25th Amendment and impeachment. That means they are serious. They are telling him to step down or face removal. The 25th Amendment allows the cabinet to declare the president unable to fulfill his duties, while impeachment is Congress's route for removing a president over serious offenses. What is really striking here is the bipartisan nature of the letter. If it were just Democrats calling for his resignation, he might brush it off as typical party politics. But when members of his own party join in, it really shows that he has lost support even among those Republican senators who once defended him. This gives their demand for his resignation a political weight that a purely partisan push simply would not have. There's also the matter of that closed-door session where Trump made a sudden exit. It was supposed to be a briefing on Iran, the government shutdown, war powers, and funding issues. Senators were trying to talk to him about the risks of civilian casualties related to his threats of bombing Iranian infrastructure. You can imagine how that went. Senators were really pushing for answers about Trump's war powers, questioning whether he overstepped his authority by launching the conflict without getting the approval from Congress. They also wanted to hear Trump's take on the resignation letters that were circulating, asking why he still believes he should remain in office. But instead of addressing any of those real questions, Trump just walked out without offering any explanation. There was no defense of his strategy with Iran, no engagement on the demands for resignation, just a quick exit from the room. It honestly feels like he showed a clear disregard for Senate oversight and accountability, and maybe he simply did not have solid answers to the tough questions they were throwing at him. It is like he decided the best strategy was to avoid it all by leaving. Analysts have pointed out that this is not an isolated incident. There have been several moments of friction recently between Trump and Senate Republicans. Coverage has highlighted how Republican senators have started to break away from Trump, whether on votes surrounding war powers, resisting the elimination of the filibuster, or pushing back on his stance toward NATO, as well as questioning his approach to Iran. Each of those moments was significant, but collectively they show a real decline in Trump's support in the Senate. Republican senators are not just going along with Trump anymore, or defending his moves like they once did. When they call for Trump to resign, it is a clear statement of where things stand. Even if it is not an official Senate expulsion, the Senate does not have the power to unilaterally remove a president. That whole process requires impeachment from the House and a conviction from the Senate, or a cabinet move under the 25th Amendment. Still, it is worth noting that there are actual recorded calls for his resignation, with several senators, including Senator Jeff Merkley's office, documenting it all and making their demands public. This is not just chatter. Senators are putting their names on letters calling for Trump to step down. Both the House and Senate, with voices from both parties chiming in, are all saying Trump needs to go, which is an unprecedented level of pushback against a sitting president. It connects to broader congressional pressure as well, since there are over 70 House Democrats backing Representative Larson's 13 articles of impeachment. It also reminds many observers of Trump's history of walking out when faced with accountability, like back in 2019 when he abruptly left shutdown talks with Democrats. It seems like instead of engaging in discussions, he prefers to disengage and leave when faced with hard questions. This ongoing behavior really adds to the narrative that his hold on Washington is slipping. What is interesting is that resignation demands, which used to come solely from activists and progressive House members, are now being voiced by bipartisan groups of senators. Meanwhile, Trump has been choosing to physically back away instead of defending his actions. This shift suggests that the biggest threat to his presidency might actually be an institutional revolt rather than just typical opposition. Now, let us get into what these senators are actually saying in their resignation demand and why it matters so much. The letter reportedly claims that Trump has lost the moral authority to command the military. That is an important distinction because moral authority is not the same as legal authority. Legally, as president, Trump has the right to command the military under Article 2 of the Constitution. But moral authority depends on whether people trust and respect his judgment and leadership. After Trump made alarming threats toward Iran, started an unauthorized conflict that did not go anywhere, and then ended up conceding to Iranian terms, these senators feel he cannot be trusted with such serious power, including nuclear weapons. His extreme threats and questionable judgment raise real concerns about the danger he poses if he remains in charge. What makes the moral authority argument so compelling is that it is very difficult to refute. You either have trust or you do not. And when bipartisan senators publicly declare they do not trust Trump, it reflects the sentiment of their constituents. Those senators are taking a risk with their political reputations by stating that Trump is unfit for office, which of course makes their claims carry real weight. The way they structured the ultimatum, asking him to resign by a specific date or else face the 25th Amendment and possible impeachment, is quite deliberate. It gives Trump a possible way out that allows him to save face. He could resign and claim he is doing so for the good of the country, leaving on his own terms and at least maintaining a bit of dignity while shaping the story of his departure. However, if he decides against resigning, senators are ready to take action to remove him following constitutional guidelines. To invoke the 25th Amendment, the vice president and a majority of the cabinet have to declare that Trump is not fit to do his job. That is a tough call, since Vice President Vance, who is pretty loyal to Trump, and Trump's cabinet is filled with his supporters. Still, the mere idea of this course of action shows that senators are seriously considering their options for getting Trump out. Impeachment might actually be the more viable route. The House is already pushing forward with Representative Larson's 13 articles of impeachment. If senators are also calling for Trump's removal, it could ramp up the pressure on House Republicans to support impeachment as well, and on Senate Republicans to vote for a conviction. To successfully convict Trump, they would need a 2/3 majority in the Senate, which means 67 votes. That is roughly 17 to 20 Republican senators teaming up with all the Democrats. It is a pretty tall order, but with some Republican senators already asking for Trump to resign, there is a chance they might be open to voting for conviction if impeachment moves forward. Now, there was that closed-door briefing where Trump actually walked out, which was supposed to be his chance to explain himself to the senators. These types of briefings happen all the time. The president meets with Congress to go over national security concerns, outline policies, and address questions. It is all part of the checks and balances in government, allowing Congress to oversee the executive branch. But it seems Trump was not interested in that process. Senators were asking serious questions about the legality of starting the Iran conflict without congressional approval, the risks of civilian casualties from bombing Iranian power plants, and how he justifies threatening an entire civilization. They wanted to know why he still believes he is fit to be commander-in-chief. Those questions make total sense, and it is Trump's job to respond to them and explain his choices to Congress. Instead, he just walked out, which is really not the way to treat Congress. It is like he is saying he does not owe them any answers or explanations. Trump's approach to challenges seems to follow a pattern. The man really does not like being put on the spot or facing difficult questions. When he feels cornered or is not getting his way, his go-to move is to walk out of the situation. He did it back in January of 2019 during a government funding discussion with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. They would not agree to fund his border wall, and he declared it a waste of time right before leaving the meeting. That walkout set the tone for what has become a familiar trend. Fast forward to now, and this is not just a one-time thing. He has walked out of briefings about Iran and even made a quick exit from a press conference back in April of 2026 after only 12 minutes. This behavior says a lot about his mindset and how he handles leadership. It is as if he cannot take the heat when asked tough questions or confronted. Instead of sticking around to debate or clarify, he just disengages. What is also significant is how Republican senators are beginning to distance themselves from him. There are clips of them standing up to Trump's demands, like when they refused to eliminate the filibuster or defended judicial independence when he attacked judges. Some are even raising concerns about his strategy regarding Iran. Individually, each of these moments might seem minor, but collectively, they indicate a growing willingness among Republican senators to challenge Trump publicly. They are recognizing his political weaknesses and realizing that his failures, whether in foreign policy or legal troubles, do not just affect him, they might affect those senators too. With Trump's approval numbers falling, it looks like senators are realizing that sticking by him may not be worth the political risk. Some Republican senators facing re-elections in 2026 or 2028 are in states where Trump is not exactly popular. They see the need to separate themselves from him if they want a shot at winning. Then there are others thinking about their legacies. They do not want to be remembered as the ones who stood by and enabled Trump's worst behavior. A few senators genuinely believe Trump overstepped with the Iran conflict and the threats he made, leading to some moral objections against continuing to support him. Regardless of their reasons, it is clear that Trump is losing support among senators across the board. Once you lose that backing as a president, you are in serious trouble, since the Senate holds considerable influence over your agenda through confirmation, votes, and legislation, plus the looming threat of impeachment. The way the House and Senate interact is also key to understand. They may operate independently, but they definitely influence one another. If the House starts moving toward impeachment, it creates pressure on the Senate to take it seriously. Conversely, when the Senate calls for Trump's resignation, it adds weight to the House's impeachment push. When you have both chambers calling for Trump's removal, it creates a kind of pressure that is much more powerful than what either chamber could generate on its own. It is noteworthy that Senator Jeff Merkley and others are publicly signing their names to these resignation demands, because it shows they are ready to be held accountable for their stance. If they had done it anonymously, Trump could easily brush it off. But since they are putting their names out there, they have to own this position, and voters will know who called for Trump to step down. This is not just grandstanding. Senators are making a real public commitment to his removal, a stance they will be held accountable for. This level of public commitment hints at their belief that there is political support for this call, positioning it as a beneficial move rather than a risky one. Framing it as an institutional revolt really fits, because this is not just about Democrats against a Republican president. It is more complex than that. It is really something to see Congress standing up against what they view as presidential overreach and unfitness. When both parties in both chambers agree that the president needs to go, it shows the legislative branch stepping up to check the executive branch. The Constitution was designed for exactly this kind of dynamic. The founders were careful to avoid letting presidents act like kings with unchecked power. They equipped Congress with tools for oversight, legislation, confirmation votes, and even impeachment. They expected Congress to use these tools whenever a president abused their power or proved unfit for office. And right now, that is exactly what is happening. What is revealing is Trump's choice to disengage instead of defending himself. If he had solid answers to the senators' questions, he would surely share them. If he could justify threats to wipe out civilizations or explain the legal grounds for starting a war, we would be hearing all about it. But the truth is, Trump does not have those answers. His only move is to sidestep the questions by walking out. Sure, this tactic might work for now. He can dodge the need to respond without facing immediate consequences. Yet, in the grand scheme, his refusal to engage only strengthens the case for his removal. Senators can easily point out that they offered Trump a chance to defend himself, and he walked away. They asked fair questions, and his exit shows he cannot justify his actions, proving he is unfit to remain in office. So what is next? And what does this extraordinary demand for resignation actually mean? Let us break it down. It is highly unlikely that Trump will resign voluntarily. His entire persona is built on never admitting defeat or backing down. Resigning would feel like accepting failure and being pushed out, something his ego simply cannot take. Unless things get truly dire for him, like facing an imminent conviction and removal, he is not going to step down no matter what senators are calling for. But if Trump refuses to resign, that puts the pressure on senators to act on their threat to invoke the 25th Amendment or move toward impeachment. This means they have to put their votes where their words are. And senators who signed that resignation letter will certainly feel pressure to support impeachment. It is interesting to see how this push for Trump's resignation is gaining traction. If Senate Republicans do not follow through on their demands, they risk looking like hypocrites, calling for Trump to step down, but then voting to keep him in office. This whole situation is giving a real boost to House impeachment efforts too. With Representative Larson's 13 articles of impeachment already in motion, and with senators now openly agreeing that Trump should go, it is making it much easier for House Democrats to argue that impeachment is both necessary and justified. This might even sway some House Republicans, especially if they see their Senate counterparts taking a stand. If Democratic leadership decides to act quickly, we could see a House vote on impeachment articles within just a few weeks. Trump's abrupt departure from the Senate briefing, combined with his refusal to address calls for his resignation, is just more evidence to Democrats of his contempt for constitutional oversight, further strengthening the impeachment case. Senate Republicans are in a tough spot. They have to choose whether to back Trump and face the consequences of being associated with his failures, which could put their re-election chances at risk. Or they might align with a bipartisan resignation call and be open to convicting Trump if it comes to impeachment, which could put them at odds with Trump's base and make them targets for primary challenges. Some may lean toward defending Trump out of fear of those primary challenges, but others could realize that supporting him is essentially a death sentence for their political careers. Those latter Republicans could end up being the crucial votes needed to convict Trump should impeachment make it that far. On top of all that, Trump's tactic of walking out is really backfiring. Instead of coming across as strong and defiant, he is looking weak and guilty. If he truly believed in his position and felt fit for office, he would stick around to defend himself. Instead, he seems to be dodging difficult questions, which just plays into the narrative of him being unfit for the job. This whole scenario might actually speed up Trump's political downfall, creating a chain reaction. Once a few senators start calling for his resignation, it paves the way for others to follow suit. Then, if the Senate demands his resignation, it opens the door for similar calls from governors and even former officials. So here is the situation. Trump is facing serious pressure from multiple directions. A bipartisan group of senators representing millions of voters has publicly called for him to step down. They are not just raising concerns over his handling of the military and national security. They have stated outright that he has lost the moral authority to command the military. Legal arguments about war powers and the Constitution are not going to help him here. People either feel he is trustworthy or they do not, and clearly many have already made up their minds. What adds to Trump's troubles is that he is becoming more isolated, both on the international stage and at home. His own allies in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and Gulf partners seem to have abandoned his Iran strategy. And now his own Senate is telling him he should resign. That does not paint a very effective picture of his presidency. It shows he cannot govern when he is losing support everywhere. During a closed-door session discussing Iran and war powers, Trump reportedly walked out after senators pressed him on the risks to civilians and the legal limits of his authority. He left without addressing the calls for him to step down, which is quite telling. Republican senators have been pushing back against him on various issues, from war powers, votes, to foreign policy, highlighting a systematic erosion of support in the Senate. This is not just idle chatter. There are formal letters and documented calls for resignation from multiple senators, including Senator Merkley's office. It all ties back to discussions about impeachment and the 25th Amendment, creating a strong wave of congressional pressure from both the House and the Senate. What stands out is this pattern of Trump walking away from serious conversations about accountability. It shows a tendency to disengage instead of defending his actions. Overall, all of this contributes to a narrative that Trump's hold over Washington is weakening. The biggest threat he faces now is not just opposition, it is a potential revolt from the institutions around him. It seems like Trump is set on not stepping down, which might push senators to go ahead with impeachment. Senate Republicans are caught in a tough spot, having to choose between standing by Trump or voting for his removal. When Trump walked out, it honestly did not do him any favors, making him appear weak and guilty. It feels like this could really speed up his downfall, especially as more voices begin joining the call for his resignation. The argument about moral authority is simply impossible for him to fight against. With everything going on, including his growing international isolation, it looks like Trump is struggling on multiple fronts and losing support left and right.